from the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg. This is a special edition of Inside Government with Charity Dunker.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Inside Government Interview. I'm Charity Dunker, and my guest I'm being joined with today is none other than Mistress Elaine Gumbs Vlaun. We're going to be highlighting and celebrating the International Social Workers Day under the global theme, Respecting Diversity Through Joint Social Action. Welcome, Miss Elaine Gumbs Vlaun, to this edition of Inside Government. How are you doing?
I'm pretty fine, thank you, and thank you for your introduction.
Good. Very happy to have you. Let's start off by you as a pioneer in the field of social work and setting up of social agencies in St. Martin, right? Can you share with us what it was like then as a social worker and the demands and what was available at that time?
Okay, when I returned from studying social work, I passed through the hands of the Court of Guardianship in Curacao and Aruba before coming here. So I had like 3 months practice before coming to St. Martin. I started working on St. Martin in December 69, and I was a lone ranger at that time. I was the first social worker on the island, St. Martin born. And it was tough, because being alone, you had to actually set up everything from scratch. Even though there was a school teacher, Mr. Lan, and he was doing it part-time before I came. But shortly after I returned, I came to St. Martin. He stopped it because it was really heavy on him also. And in those days, you actually were social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever. Because the minute they knew that you were there to, let's say, guide people and help them solve their problems, it was like a crazy house. Everybody came to you because you were the person to solve their problem.
Right.
So I did that for like a little over 2.5 years, but it was really becoming too much. I was all alone. You had to close your office to go on home visits. You had to close the office to go to courts because I was at the Court of Guardianship. So when you had a court case, close up shop. When you come back, you had people waiting for you, you know. So it was kind of rough. And at a certain point, it really got to me, and I said, no, I can't do it alone anymore. But shortly before I left to go to Curacao to work, there was a lady by the name of Joyce Hope, also a social worker, and she took over from me. At that time, I was lucky enough to get one person to work with me, so I left her with that person. That was Stephanie, what's her name again? Stephanie Matthew, and she was the administrative clerk at that time. But it was rough on her also because one person for the whole island was not easy. And it was not only in the office, but you were also out in the field. You had to go to the schools, you know, visit hospital, everything. Whatever problem there was, they would call on you because I think they figured that you had a magic wand,
Yes.
which you didn't have.
Yeah.
So it was rough. And at a certain point, I asked for help because it fell on the central government then. And actually, it was told by a social worker who had 10 years experience that it wasn't necessary to have more than one social worker on St. Martin because even half a day, the person would do everything, would be able to do everything.
But that was back then.
Back then, yes. So I think her boss played a pivotal role in sending her here for a month because I was really completely stressed out. And for that month that she was here, she left after 2 weeks. And she told them she needed 5 more people because it was much too much. And I got very upset with her, you know, because I told her, I am just fresh from studying, and you feel that I can do it all by myself, and you have 10 years, but you need 5 people to work with you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in those days, I was very blunt. So I just told it to her. But anyway, it was a good experience, and I left from here, and I went to Curacao for another. I left in 72 and I returned in 77. So about 4.5 years I spent in Curacao. And I worked there at the House of St. Joseph, an institution for wayward and abused children. I was the assistant director there. But after a while, you want to come back home. In those days, you really want to be home. So I came back, and I want to stay home even though I was practically raised on Aruba.
Okay.
Because I left here at 7 years to go and spend vacation with my godmother. But she enrolled me in school right away over there. So I spent my, the educational years at school in Aruba. And there I finalized at that time, it was habeas.
Yeah.
And then I went to study for social work. How did I study for social work? We had some cases in the neighborhood in Aruba, and the children, or at least one particular child, was being abused immensely. She's on St. Martin now, and she's like my child. And she was being abused, and many a time I had to save her by keeping her by me as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I made up my mind and said, when I get big, I want to do something for children like this person. So I had a cousin who was also a social worker, but she was born on Aruba. And I got in contact with her via my godmother, and she explained me more or less what the social work was all about and what she was doing. So I said, that's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up studying, social work.
Mm-hmm.
But to come back to St. Martin, after I returned from Curacao, I actually had an appointment to go back to the Court of Guardianship, which I bluntly refused because I had already applied for another job also. Milton Peters College was not long built, and the schools, you were getting a lot of schools, and I said, hey, I think we will need a school social worker.
Yeah.
So I came back, and even though I was a school social worker, there were still people who knew me from the Court of Guardianship. They would come to me because of knowing what I was doing. So I always had to refer them back to the Court of Guardianship because I was doing something completely different. Mm-hmm. And there again, I was alone. But slowly but surely, some other social workers came. And in 1979, the then Commissioner, Rupert Maynard, called me to his office, and he always called me Lynchy. And he said, Lynchy, I want you to do me a favor. Like, so he said, we have this problem with the list of persons who are receiving welfare, understand. I would like you to check it out for me and do something about it. So that's how social welfare started. Mm-hmm. And you had to clean up the list, call in the people, let them come with their ID cards or passport or whatever. And a lot of people came off then because people were collecting for dead people who were no longer on the island, they were collecting for them. And I made a lot of enemies then because there was one particular lady who collected 3 times for herself. Say, for instance, I'm Elaine Bernadette Vlaun.
Yeah.
I collected on the Elaine Vlaun, Bernadette Vlaun, and Elaine Bernadette Vlaun.
Okay.
And it was not noticed. So this person was like collecting 3 times. Mm-hmm. And she was upset with me because I told her, said, no, you can only collect once. You can't collect 3 times. And for years, she took her speech from me. It's someone I know very well, I knew and still know very well. But she was very upset because of that. And then others who were collecting for dead people, they could no longer collect for them because the person was not existing anymore. So I started up social welfare. We started putting things in place, making a list of requirements, what you have to bring. The very first list, I guess it's changed now, but the very first list we made up the documents that you have to submit before a request can be made. And that started off more and more social workers coming on the island. Mm-hmm. We had your mother, for instance, was one. Joel Arndell was the next one. Errol Larmoni, Joy Ref, Maria Kruithof. It started growing slowly, but eventually we had a group and we used to meet once a week to discuss certain things, which was very good.
Okay. Now, as I don't want to really interject because you're already in your flow, but taking it back from when you said you grew up in Aruba, yes, St. Martin being home, the interest was piqued to becoming a social worker when you took in the young lady, correct?
not take her, I didn't take her in, but I just saw what was happening, and I said I would like to help in the
that
future in
field.
that field.
Okay,
Yes,
and that is
but she
what.
happened to be living close to us, so many a time she would come over by me, and I would try to protect her, a child protecting a child.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
So it was in you already.
Yes.
And you knew that this is what you
Oh,
wanted
even
to do.
before that, it was something was in me, because before I left from St. Martin at the age of 7, we had neighbors with smaller children, and I was a school teacher.
Yes. So all these children were around you.
Yes, I always loved children. So we played school, and I was a teacher.
Okay.
So from then, from a very tender age, there was something in me with children, even though I was a child myself.
We see that today, to be considered a social worker, they would have to have attained at least a bachelor's degree or a HBO in that field. Was it the same then at that time too?
Yes, they wouldn't take you in the school for social work, unless you had at that time HABS, and that's what I had. I was very fortunate, that I had that, so I was able to get in easily, and it was a study of 4 years, which after that you had the opportunity to work for 2 years in Holland and then do what they call the voortgezette opleiding.
Right.
And actually, because I came from St. Martin, or from the Caribbean, which was far away, they offered me to do it right away after I finished. But I didn't want to stay in Holland, because to me, Holland had started changing in a negative way. When I went there, it wasn't, Holland was a nice place to live, and easy to make friends. People were curious because, our skin color, they didn't see much of them, especially where I was. I was in Hengelo, and there weren't too many colored people there. Eventually, we ended up with about 6 or 7 nurses, social workers, school teachers, and we formed a group. But we had a lot of Dutch friends.
Yeah.
But I never, let's say, thought that people looked at you differently until children would start saying things. Children would call you Zwarte Piet, and I made friends with them. There was this little particular boy, every time I passed his house, he would be sitting outside. That's Zwarte Piet. So I asked him, I said, why are you sitting outside? He said, ik wil lekker bruin worden. So I told him, ik hoef niet in de zon te zitten, want ik ben al bruin.
Yeah.
And his mother was looking from upstairs, so I knew that she was the one who was actually telling him I was a Zwarte Piet. But we became friends. But it all depends on how you approach it,
Yeah.
So, but in the end, you started noticing people asking you questions. How do you feel being black? How do you feel, does anyone, tell you any racist things? And when they started out, I would tell them, I say, I never had that, but you're the first person who was doing it and asking me those questions. And you shut them up right away. But because of those things, I became very cautious. And then the Surinamese in Holland started getting a bad name. And somewhere else, another group of people started getting a bad name. And you were the complexion of those people.
Yeah.
So that's where they started, picking on you. And I said, no, let me go back home.
That was it for you. That was
Yes.
your moment where you knew it was
Yes,
time
I
to
said,
return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, here on Inside Government Interview, being joined by a pioneer herself, social worker. Yeah. She's taking us back then and to what she's seeing, the changes that's been made now. Right? None other than Mistress Elaine Gumbs Vlaun. Do stay tuned. This is Inside Government, and I am Charity Dunker. I'll be back right after this.
Humans, animals, organisms, and plants are all part of our existence on this earth, each living and surviving while contributing to a collective and balanced ecosystem that allows us all to exist interdependently, none more valuable or important than the next. Sharks, stingrays, sea turtles, marine mammals like dolphins and whales, stony coral and brown pelicans are all part of the animal species on St. Martin that are protected. They are protected because they are endangered. It is illegal to catch, disturb, injure, and/or kill any of these protected species, or even disturb their nesting or living habitat. If you have caught any of these endangered animal species unintentionally, release them immediately. If you see someone violating these laws, kindly let them know that their actions are wrong, unethical, and illegal. If you see any of these irregularities, report the incident to the Nature Foundation, the Coast Guard, or the police. By protecting our natural environment and our endangered species, we can maintain a healthy biodiversity and a balanced ecosystem that we all can exist and thrive and call home. Our home, St. Martin.
This message was brought to you by environmentalist Tazio Bervuts and the Department of Communication.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Inside Government Interview. I'm your host, Charity Dunker, being joined by pioneer herself, social worker, Mistress Elaine Gumbs Vlaun. Welcome back. Right before the break, we touched base on your educational background, what drove you to want to study in the field of social work, and also coming back to St. Martin. Yeah, and thank you so much once again for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Now, I know you're someone who jots down a lot of notes, perhaps, and also you're good with knowing the years and dates of when certain things was established. Speaking in that direction of establishment, the Social Welfare Department, in what year was that department established?
It was established in 1979 when, as I told you, Mr. Maynard had asked me to do something with the list that he had. And because of that, I could not do the school social work anymore. So I dedicated all my time to setting up the office. And it has grown now to a very large office. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, we merged with the labor office after Mr. Arndell, mm-hmm. Jocelyn Arndell went on pension. The two offices were in the same building, at the Marcus building. And we merged together and became social welfare and labor.
Yeah.
But when I actually had to start with the social welfare, it was only Elaine, and then I got Elvia Guy. Mm-hmm. So it was two of us, and then we had Shirley Richardson and Mary Froston.
Okay.
And after Shirley Priest came also. So those 5 people were social welfare mm-hmm, department mm-hmm, mm-hmm. for a couple of years until about 89, I think it was. And then we merged with the labor office. So we became one office, social welfare and labor.
And your task, everyone individually of the group of 5?
Well, basically everyone did everything because I always told them, I am a person. I'm not going to keep everything to myself. We have to share knowledge.
Yeah.
So Elvia was a nurse. She was also doing social work. Mary was an administrative person, but I taught her how to write very short reports, mm-hmm. and those reports I would check them, correct them, send them in, mm-hmm. But I had to sign. I had to sign all the reports. But she had to do a little of it. Mm-hmm. And Shirley Richardson was really administration. She did more administrative work. And Shirley Priest was a social worker also. She had studied in the States. Okay. So we all had our task. And I mean, I always was proud of my girls, as you call them. And I always told people I can go to Timbuktu and mm-hmm. come back because I know the office
in good hands.
Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Agencies. Were there establishments of social work agencies apart from having social development welfare?
Well, only the school social work was there and the Court of Guardianship. Those were the 3 existing agencies. Mm-hmm. But out of those, other things were developed, like another agency like Safe Haven, Women's Desk. Those things came out of mm-hmm. that group.
Right.
Together with other people.
Mm-hmm. Were you also invited to help out in certain areas, called upon, as you said, when you came back here? You also did some work at the Voogdijraad then, basically?
Yeah, I started out at the Voogdijraad. Mm-hmm. That's where I started.
And then after that, you still were called upon when the other agencies formulated? You was called upon for assistance?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So you had to actually, disappoint certain people and tell them, I'm no longer working there, so I have to let you go to that particular office that is in charge of that item that you need help with, you know. But there are lots of different organizations, for instance, that was set up. But in those days, now it's maybe a little different, but in those days, if you help people set up an organization,
Right.
I always used to stay for 1 year. I tell them, I'll help you set it up, and we'll run it for 1 year, but after that year, I'm out.
Right.
You have to continue running it. And every one of them, after the year, nobody was interested in having the responsibility. And now you're seeing it now also. There are people who don't want to have the responsibility, but they want to be there for the show.
Right.
And their name is there. They are part of. And I don't think that that's the right attitude to have. As a matter of fact, my motto is, if you want to be a social worker, a nurse, or a school teacher, it has to come from your heart. Don't do it because, for instance, some people say, I'm doing it because it pays well, or I'm getting a salary, a steady income. No. Don't do it for that.
Back then, you speak of popularity. Was it the popular direction to go in social work here on the island, in the community, you know, compared to today, back then?
I think it remains basically the same. There are lots of things, problems that still exist. My heart goes out to what they call the boys on the block. I make friends with a lot of them in Middle Region. I live in Middle Region, and I make friends with them.
Yeah.
They call me mom because whether they know my name or not. But as I'm an older person, they would call me mom.
Okay.
And you talk to them, you know, and ask them what they would like to do. But now some of them have moved away and they went higher up. So I'm kind of, you know, not distancing myself, but there's a distance between us now. But the boys who used to be around my area, we had a good rapport. And they would tell me their problems, why they got on drugs, why they're drinking alcohol, what they wanted to do with their lives. One of them ended up in Holland. He wanted to go to Holland and he didn't get a chance. And then you encourage them.
Yeah.
Tell them, you know, you have to change your way of life. You have to do X, Y, Z in order for people to see that you're serious. And that is something perhaps that didn't exist so much in those days because we had no drugs.
Yeah.
But once it started, it just skyrocketed and messed up a lot of our people.
Wow.
So that is a real vast area that has to be looked in. The boys on the street, young people, people who are not working, try to get them, you know, reschooled or things like that. And if you don't have the backing, you can't get it done. One person can't do it, two people can't do it. We all have to put our heads together to do it.
You made mention of how you decided to go about doing so and reaching out to the boys on the block, as you mentioned, so to speak. The agencies that you mentioned of that we see today, back then, were there any?
No, there weren't any, no. So you were just a lone ranger doing these kind of things.
And just hoping that someone in the community, as you say, your nickname is mom to them.
Yes.
You would hope that someone would be that at that time to them too.
Exactly, exactly. And I was criticized a lot for, you know, just standing up talking to those boys, you know.
I could imagine.
Can you trust them? You know, they're going to steal from you, they're going to this, they're going to that. If they ask me for money, no, you're not getting any money. You want food? I'll go to the Chinese restaurant with you, give you a plate of food.
Yeah.
And if they refuse, I say, well, then you don't need the food.
Yeah.
But eventually, you know, they would get accustomed to it and say, okay, I'll go and take the food. And I stood there and made sure they eat their food. Because, you know, they don't have any money, so they want to sell the food. That's what a lot of them wanted to do. So
social work.
They went through a lot with me also.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't easy on many of them.
Social work is a very intricate profession where there is the need for the worker to understand the people, see the same area, we're in the same direction, to understand the people in their environment. Do you think it is important for social workers to also be trained at home in that field, like right here on the island, versus having to go abroad? Because if you look at it good, the social realm in another country and culture is different versus what we have here on the island.
Yes.
So how you feel about that, Mistress Elaine?
I'm very much
what suggestion would you
having
give?
that done. When I was working in Curacao, we had a group and we set up a course in basic social work. And that was a success. But they only did it twice, and then after that, basically all the social workers or people who wanted to do social work, they were kind of, the pot was empty because they wanted to do something else. But some of them did the course, and after that, they continued, they went to Holland to study and come back. So some of them did not do social work after, they maybe went into psychology or something else. But it was necessary because you're learning at home. You're learning with your people. Even though you think you know your people, you don't really know them unless you get into their situation. Then you learn how hard or not hard it is for them. You always have to try to put yourself in the shoes of another person. And with me, what I did is the minute I start feeling too comfortable, I would say, no, Elaine, you can't continue like that. Let's say you would start comparing, and that's not good. The two people would have basically the same problem, but one is always worse than the other. But you can't compare. For each person, it is a very hard thing that they're going through. So you can't say, okay, Elaine, don't worry about her so much. Her problem isn't that bad. And Elena, yes, you have to really take care of her. No, you have to have both of them on an equal playground and show the people that you really care. Because when you start doing that, you're not going to be doing it wholeheartedly. You're going to be biased, and that's not good. I had it once, and that was also when I was in Curacao, and then I started thinking about, hey, Elaine, it's time to leave. When you're going to start doing that? I felt it myself, and I said, no, if you start doing that, get out. And then I came back to St. Martin.
Mistress Elaine Gumbs Vlaun, we're running out of time. And with that being said, I would like to invite you to rejoin me again, and we'll do another continuation, the next episode. We'll turn this one into our segment 2 of this interview. All right?
Thank you very much, and I don't mind. You're always welcome to call on me.
Good. Once again, radio listeners, television viewers, this brings us to the end of part 1 of our interview with Mistress Elaine Gumbs Vlaun, social worker here in St. Martin. And I like to say, a commendable pioneer. Happy to have her as our guest here on Inside Government Interview. Once again, I'm Charity Dunker. To our radio listeners and television viewers, if you have missed this interview, be sure to join us again for rebroadcast right here on St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and also at stmartingov.org for video on demand. On behalf of our team here at the Department of Communication, I am Charity Dunker. Thank you very much for tuning in.